Give a big round of the hand. Give a big round. Give a big round. Give a big round. Give a big round. Give a big round of the hand. Give a big round. Give a big round. Big round. Give a big round. Give a big.
We could have homes on separate coasts, go dive in Greece with squids. Could have been so bleeping rich, but instead we had kids. They won't smile for a photo, they won't eat the food we choose. That's why we're heading to the Parents' Lounge to drown ourselves in booze. Every day we're more exhausted, we haven't slept in years. They hit me in the nuts so bad, my eyes filled up with tears. And yes, we'd like to fake our death and go off of the grids, but the truth is we are softies and we truly love our kids. So join us every Tuesday night to laugh at all our pain. Evening in the Parents' Lounge is the cure to staying sane. Welcome, everybody, to another Parental Mental Health Tuesday here in the Parents' Lounge. We have a fantastic show for you tonight. Jamie Kaler, joined as always by Jason Gowan and Kate Mulligan. Hi, everybody.
What's up, Late Mulligan? How are you?
That's going to be your name from now on, Late Mulligan. Oh, that's so good.
It's so funny. They actually called me that on SEN Live, so it's an old nickname that I've really it's well earned. I'll be honest.
Oh, it's well earned. My wife is Kate as well, and her nickname, which I wish I'd have thought of, but it was her old boyfriend gave her the nickname Exaggerate.
Oh, that's so good.
It is so spot on.
That's so good.
If she had 3 donuts, she goes, I had 6 donuts. Everything is just an embellishment of insanity. So yeah.
Oh man.
Jobo and narcolepsy already in the house.
Hi,
Kate been late, Mulligan. We're so excited. We have already a lot of our fans are already in tonight. Jobo, we have such a fun show tonight. As a former Navy guy, I am really excited to have this guy. He is great. Let's just jump right into this. I'm going to give him a nice little intro because I'm so impressed by this gentleman. He is a retired Navy SEAL. He is a speaker, a highly sought after leadership instructor. He served in the military for nearly 30 years before retiring as the SEAL Team 5 Command Master Chief. That's a great term. Jason, he deployed 9 times and is the recipient of the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Purple Heart. Today, he is a strategic advisor, leadership instructor, and speaker at Echelon Front, an education and training organization founded by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. They are the authors of New York Times #1 bestseller, Extreme Ownership, How U.S. Navy SEALs Lead and Win, which could not be truer. I was stationed on Coronado right across from the base where those guys were training because I was a surface warfare officer, which basically meant I was their cab driver to get them to where the battle. And then I go, hey, when the fight's over, just call me. I'll come pick you up.
Yeah, I'll come pick you up.
Yeah. We would just launch them out of cannon and then they would go do what they do. And then they would come back. He is also a fantastic dad. His policies and theories about raising children are exactly why he's here tonight. I can't wait to bring him in. Please welcome Jason Gardner.
Hello.
Wow.
I'm sorry I didn't want to do. I don't love to do extravagant intros, but I think your backstory is such a great lead-in for what kind of dad you are that I thought it was all important. So thank you for coming here tonight, Jason.
Honestly,
Thanks, Jamie.
What are you doing here with us tonight is the real question.
Mulligan shows up late and then she comes right at you with the hard-hitting questions. Why would you agree to do this? Because he tries to help out the poor and unfortunate like us.
Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. It's such an honor to meet you.
Yeah, it is. So when somebody tells me, when they say thank you for your service, I always go talk to that guy because I went in a year after Top Gun came out and hung around San Diego in my whites and tried to hook up as much as I. So for me, it was a fantastic time. Were you from Coronado? Was that where you did your time?
No. Oh, you mean, yeah, I was a West Coast SEAL, so I was in Coronado for my entire career.
Yeah. I was right there at Surface Warfare Officer School across the street. And I
Nice.
remember seeing you guys in the middle of the night with the telephone poles on your back. And I was like, man, that's not for me. That's not for me.
I had a friend who was in Hawaii, but there was a time when he was trying to become a SEAL, and that training program or that like test, that set of tests, he was like, well, they put us in these blackout goggles and bring us to the bottom of the ocean. Like the details were crazy. And he's like, and they have to swim up to the surface, and it's this camp that happens, and usually one person dies every year just in the camp. And I was like, okay. And then turns out he had a hearing defect. All he wanted was to be a SEAL, but they weren't gonna. He could run the mile and whatever you're supposed to run it in. He got out in the blackout goggles, all of it, and then they had to go and like do they like broke his nose and all of this stuff to like fix this hearing loss that he had, and the surgery didn't work. So that was the one thing that kept him from being a SEAL. But you are machines.
It's always about Kate. It's always about Kate, Jason, isn't it?
I mean, I got nothing, so it's good she's here.
Hey, listen, Jason, the backstory is amazing. Let's talk about your kids, man. You have two kids, is that right? And you had them kind of later?
So I've got 3 kids. My oldest boy is 27, and he did a tour in the Army. He just got out of the Army, and he's working construction, running heavy equipment, and making a great living and having a good time. And I've been married twice. And when I met my wife, Iris, we started a family, and my daughter's 12 and my son is 11. Daughter's name's Storm and my son is named Thor.
Are those Marvel based?
Storm is Marvel based. Thor is kind of, and then just kind of like, Thor's just so cool.
Great. Okay, gotcha.
Jason Gowan, do you want to tell him your kids' names?
My twin 4-year-olds are Anthony Parker and Logan Reed.
Oh, nice.
I slid that through. My wife allowed it to go on.
Yeah.
Well, I heard that you have your Critical Role. Some of the people have already commented on your Critical Role T-shirt. I heard you like, is it cosplay? Is that what it's properly called?
Yeah, just play Dungeons and Dragons. I played in high school, and back in the 90s when you played Dungeons and Dragons, it was frowned upon. You had to keep it a secret, so it was kind of the guys that I played with. We did not want it getting out at school, because it would have just been licensed to bully and pick on us. And then I wound up talking to a buddy of mine I played with in high school about 4 years ago. And he's like, hey, I'm playing D&D again, and it's awesome. And so I found the Critical Role podcast. I learned how to play. Then I thought my kids were too young back then because they were 7 and 8. Mm-hmm. But another friend of mine said, no, they're good to go. Just generate all their characters. So generated characters for them and my wife, and we started playing. And we basically play from about November until when the days are shorter, because I live in, up in northeastern Washington. And so we play in the winter, and then summertime comes around, we stop, we put everything on hold and play again. But my kids both play, my wife plays, and then a couple of the neighbor kids play with us. So we got a nice big party.
Well, Mulligan is a huge game player. Mulligan, aren't you?
Right on.
You're not doing Dungeons and Dragons, though. You're doing, what's your big game?
Oh, unfortunately, not role-playing games. I'm like very into like Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom and stuff like that. So nerdy in a Nintendo Switch way.
That still got me beat, because I'm like Galaga and Pac-Man. That's the extent of my gameplay. But hey, I want to start with this because you have a poem you wrote and you made it into an Instagram post, and we're going to share a little video, which is you reciting a poem, which is basically you talking to your child about your plans for how to raise that child. And it really struck me. I loved it. So let's cue it up, and then let's talk about what you talk about in this, because I think this is mandatory viewing for every parent, especially in this day and age where I feel like we're snowplow parents, helicopter parents, backpack parents, trying to get every problem out of our children's way and not preparing them for life. And you have a different approach. Jason, can we run that?
Yeah, please.
A promise to my daughter. I will love you unconditionally, always, no matter what. I will not pamper you. This will forge a resilience that'll help you conquer all of life's obstacles. I do not intend to raise a princess, but rather a warrior with fire in her heart and ice in her veins. In my mind, there's nothing you can't do, no job or goal beyond your reach. I will challenge you so that you can stand confidently on your own 2 feet, independent and strong. I will set the example on how to treat those you love, so when you choose a partner, it will be someone who lifts you up. I will invest my time and energy in you so that when I am gone, enough memories of me will be with you in your heart to keep forever. Stand tall with your shoulders back. This world is yours.
For the taking.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing, dude. What inspired you to sit down and put pen to paper and put this thing out? Because I think it's fantastic.
Getting goofy advice from other men on raising a daughter that didn't sit well with me. So the whole concept of like, oh, what do you, she's 15, guy's going to come knocking at the door. You're going to be in the living room cleaning your guns. And I'm like, that just doesn't sound like a good strategy. And I started to think, there's a lot of it. There's all kinds of advice out there. Some of it good, some of it bad, but there's a lot of stuff out there on how to raise boys, and not a lot on how to raise girls other than, oh, well, we're going to make them princesses. We're going to shelter them. And that just doesn't set them up for success.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Kate.
No, I was going to ask you, how do you feel about the advice you hear for boys? Because I feel like boys don't cry,
Yeah, that's problematic.
Yeah.
That is because they have no idea how to deal with their emotions. They just bottle them up. And then those emotions, if they're just bottling them up, they're poisoning them. And then they're going to off-gas in all kinds of ways. Violence is one of them. Anger is another one. And so I've been on and off thinking about something that I would write, like a promise to my son. And I just haven't got to it yet. I have some things fleshed out, but it's not where I want to be with where I got to the advice for my daughter. But that's some of the problems. Like, I wish I'd been taught that losing your temper is a sign of weakness. No one ever said that to me. And to me, I would see people lose, like a coach, lose their temper and start screaming and yelling. And then everybody listened, and it seemed like kind of a superpower. My parents, and I'm not blaming them because they were doing the best they could. But had I learned that much earlier on, I think that would have been a better deal.
Yeah, I love that. It's the Bobby Knight is not necessarily the greatest basketball coach of all time, but definitely the weakest with all those temper tantrums threw all up and down the floor, right?
Yeah, and it was in that one photo I'm reading to my kids out of Meditations from Marcus Aurelius, and he's the one that says it in Meditations, 2,000 years ago, and he's thinking about how to be a better person, and he's like, hey, it is not manly to lose your temper.
It's not, but listen, I'm Irish Catholic. My father used to lose his mind, but to be fair, I kept pushing him. And it's so funny because Jason and I have this conversation all the time. I try not to lose my temper. And so how do you deal with it then when I say the same thing 500 times? No response, nothing. And then finally I blow up. And then they do what I asked them to do. And even then, after that, I talk to them and I say, she's like, well, why do you yell at me? And I said, because I asked you 100 times to do it. You couldn't do it. I don't know how else to get you to do what I'm asking. How do you do it without blowing up?
You just keep trying different strategies. Every kid has got a different things that motivate them.
What if my kid's only motivated by screaming? Is that a possibility? Is that something that exists out there? Like kids with
I
kids?
doubt it. I
Really?
doubt
Oh,
it.
all right,
I
let me
think
cross that off, and I'm out.
Some of it, because the problem is when you do scream, you're modeling that behavior for them, and so
Very much so.
It's less than ideal, and so I find that a big motivator is taking away their screen time.
Can we share the video I posted today? Because
I don't have it queued. I
oh
couldn't.
my god, dude! I posted a video today, exactly that, of me saying, "Get out of the pool, get out of the pool," and then the third one, I go, "Get out of the pool. I'm going to take away your iPad," and I filmed her diving into the pool and then showed it backwards, so she vaults her way out of the pool, and that was the whole point of the post, is that literally the iPad is the only thing that any of us, Kate, Jason, and I. It's the only thing we can. It's like a blackmail tool. That's it.
Yeah, it is, and it's that, and so blackmail as a strategy overall isn't a good. The problem is that here's the problem. Honestly, the iPad is such a great babysitter that I let it become a babysitter when I'm lazy.
Me too.
And it's like, okay, hey, I want to go do something else. And I'll just let them have the iPad because I know that they're going to just be quiet and sit in one spot for a little while. And just knowing that about yourself is helpful, because most times if the kids have the choice between playing the iPad or going out and playing catch with you or reading a book with you or doing something with you, they're going to choose your attention over the iPad. It's just, unfortunately, the iPad has become convenient for us.
Very much so. Like when you go to a restaurant, we're spending hard-earned money to eat in a restaurant, and without the iPad, it's like a 20-minute fight. The whole restaurant gets destroyed, and then we end up taking food to go. Or I'm the guy who's like, here's an iPad, just sit for an hour quietly while my wife and I have a nice dinner. And it's
a restaurant for me, giving them an iPad at a restaurant is more for the other people in the restaurant, not us, because I am worried that they're going to ruin other people who are paying customers' meal. Because our twins are basically feral raccoons.
We went to a restaurant the other day.
You said they're 4?
Yeah, his are 4, but mine were like 8 and 10. We go to a restaurant the other day. The guy goes to sit us next to this other table. And I said, hey, listen, can you put us somewhere else? I don't want to torment these poor people. And both of them looked up and were like, thank you so much. Thank you. Like they knew, they saw us coming and were like, why are they seating them next to us? And they moved us.
Yeah.
But those people, everyone in the restaurant knows what's coming. It's hard to get away from it sometimes. Yeah. I don't know.
It's funny. I slightly different take, and it's going to seem self-righteous, but I don't mean it to be. That's the one place I don't let my kids have a screen. It's like if we go to a restaurant, and it's not because like, oh, I do things better, but for whatever reason, like that is a place where we just, if my husband and I want to date, we'll do that by ourselves. We wouldn't bring the kids. We would get a babysitter or whatever. If we go out to dinner, it's like, usually we're going to like some sort of like family style restaurant, like even like the local Mexican restaurant here, which is so good. And we'll play games on the menus, on the kids or whatever stuff. And that is like one line I had to draw in the sand because, and we won't let them have it in the car either. Like obviously if we're going on like a road trip, but yeah, it's honestly for me, going out to eat as a family is just to give them the experience of going out to eat. Cause that was something that was so special when I was a kid. So if I want to date, I definitely don't have them with me.
Yeah. I get it though. I get it. I get the whole thing though. It's hard. I just love that you do that though, because from day one, I spoke to my kids like they were adults. Like I never did baby talk in the crib, and I had kids at 50. I started having kids at 50.
Yeah.
And so I was pretty set in my ways. It was pretty hard for me to not explode because I'd lived alone for so long that all of a sudden these kids were, I was like, hey, don't touch my stuff. I was like, and it was really hard for me to deal with that. And so I appreciate people who talk to them like that.
Both spectrums, like parenting is a lot easier for me now than it was when I was raising my son that was 27, or, you know, being his father, just because I was broke. I didn't have, and, you know, the kid was a burden, not a blessing. When you're older, the kids, you understand that they're more of a blessing, and you can appreciate each moment and be a little bit more present in it.
Well, you were probably still in the service too, because my brother did
Yes.
35 years. My brother did 35 years, and his two kids kind of grew up without him. He was on tour.
Yeah.
He was off always on the ship overseas and whatever. And those kids didn't really grow up with him. And so he was kind of that guy who showed up and was like, hey, I'm here for Christmas, but he's back to sea. So, I mean, I think when people say thank you for your service, that's really a big part of it. The fact that you are away from your family and that he's growing up without you a lot. I think that's really hard on a kid.
Here's something that I said at my retirement when I was thanking my family, was that I volunteered for the service, right? And my wife knew that I was in the service when we were married. So we both had a choice in it, but my kids didn't have a choice. They didn't have a choice in it. They were just stuck with dad's on deployment. And if we're lucky, you know, because I missed 2 Christmases for my Storm and Thor and that, because it's how the deployment cycle was. And I just watch them open presents via FaceTime or something like that.
Yeah.
If I
feel like
the kids that really serve.
Most of the guys I know too who got through SEAL training they had that Zen state of mind. Like, I think people think like of SEALs more as like the crazy aggro guy who's over the top, right? Who's like jumping out of a helicopter to save the world. But the truth is they are just the guys who are always striving to be better. They trying to reach a Zen state. And it must be this crazy dichotomy of worlds where you are in this very aggressive aggro world. But, you know, like when I do stand-up, I know when I'm amped, I don't perform as better. When I'm calm and mellow and everything is locked in, I'm way better at my performance. And I think SEALs are kind of in that vein.
SEALs are like any other community. There's a spectrum of SEALs, and there are guys that are going kind of nuts and all that, and then there are guys at the other end of the spectrum that are more thoughtful and continually trying to get better.
Yeah. When you talk to your kids, I feel like we're always the same too. Of like after something happens with my children, I always try to have a conversation about what they're feeling and how I try to explain to my daughter that you think you're the only one feeling this. Everybody feels this way. It's so natural to go into a group of friends and be excluded and feel odd and try to, and so all this human nature stuff that I try to talk to my kids about, it seems like you are kind of locked into, reading your Instagram posts and going through a lot of your stories and stuff with your kids. I mean, do you think that they seem great kids? I mean, do they act up? Do you have to punish them at times, or are they just good kids?
Yeah, of course they act up, and they there are consequences when they do stuff wrong. But
what are your punishment besides taking the iPad away?
Yeah, I was curious. I'm curious about what is your punishment style?
Burpees, 1,000 burpees.
No, we don't do the push-ups. Usually, it's just like a loss of autonomy. So, that because they want to be free to do whatever they want, and then if there's a transgression, then we're just like, okay, well, hey, you're losing that freedom. I'm not going to let you go off and do something else.
I like that
later, and that resonates with my daughter. Loves her autonomy, and so if she starts to feel cramped in, then she realizes, oh, okay, I need to, there's a certain way I got to behave. My son he's fairly easy.
Which is weird, really. I figure the boys are trickier, but I guess not.
I have to ask.
Not in my case.
Sorry. I do have to ask, and I hope this isn't offensive, but I feel like I'm like a real everyman. So pardon my ignorance on the subject, but I heard SEAL Team 5 You were one away from SEAL Team 6, man.
Oh,
you guys
well,
considered? Were you guys
how the
considered
Navy?
for that mission?
So here's how the Navy works. All the odd SEAL teams are on the West Coast, and all the even SEAL teams are on the East Coast.
Oh,
So it's not an
Oh.
incremental one.
You
and
don't
SEAL teams
graduate
are-
from 1 to 6,
Oh,
crazy
okay.
fans.
okay.
Yeah.
That's the team.
Almost got
The teams
got it.
the teams have nothing to do. It's not like, oh, the 1, 2, 3 is the minor leagues and the 4, 5, 6 of them. It's not how it works, crazy pants. That's hilarious that you thought that.
But I mean, it's an honest question. It's good.
It's
And
it's
Yeah,
kinda
I
funny.
also had no
SEAL
idea,
teams-
so I'm actually glad that she asked it because I was like, how does that work?
How does
Well,
that work?
listen,
Yeah.
That's a great point
And-
too, because Jason, when I got out, I only did 5 years, and it was hard for me to transfer back into society. Like I still am 15 minutes early to anything. It's just who
Yep.
I am. After my brother is institutionalized, 35 years. He is locked in. He is a Navy guy for the rest of his life. Was it hard to go back into any type of civilian world because people are like, they don't get it? Like I used to try to explain duty. Like they go like, what are you doing on the ship over the weekend? I go, well, we can't leave this. We can't just lock it up and walk away. Someone has to stand duty. And they just
Yeah.
couldn't comprehend how the Navy works. So it was a hard transition for me to go into the real world. For you, it must have been pretty tricky.
I was so done with it. I was so done with the military after 30 years that I actually moved the family up to northeastern Washington from San Diego 3 months before I retired, and then I had a bunch of terminal leave and then had to go back. But I just got a new peer group. And that's the biggest problem folks have when they get out of the military is all of a sudden they're out of a peer group and they're out of people that they can relate to, because there's jokes that you can tell on the ship that you can't tell other places because people will just look at you and like, oh my gosh, what did you just say?
Yeah.
It doesn't work. So
yeah,
the area I live in is super rural. And so it was easy for me to find a lot of folks that were like, had the same passions and same interests that I did. And so I just developed a new peer group. And then honestly, my wife is my best friend. And so as long as the two of us are around each other, I'm good to go there. But a lot of folks, I think when they really miss the military is because they just didn't run full cycle with it. And but at 30 years, I was just like, oh, good grief, get me out of here.
That's how I felt at 3, and I took me 2 more years. I got out of 5, and my father was career military too. And I got out to become an actor, and my father was like, "What are you doing?" Like, he lost his mind.
Wait, what was this? What is the story, Jamie? He sent you a thing in the mail.
He 1 year after he begged me, he wrote me a letter saying, "Please just stay in, get your retirement, do 20, please do 20." And I was like, I don't want to. I want to get out. And on the 1 year anniversary of the day I get out, he cut out the Navy Times pay scale and he highlighted what I would have been making had I stayed in. And he wrote in the margin, "Pretty good, huh?" And that was all that was in the envelope, just the Navy Times pay scale. And then years later, like I did a JAG episode and he was excited about that. And then I did some other Navy stuff. And finally he was like, all right, I guess you did okay. But it took a while. It is weird. I mean, we live up to our parents, and I still have friends who kind of, follow their parents' footsteps. And I just love that you're raising these independent kids. Because even this past weekend, I had to go for a AYSO soccer coaching class. I'm coaching my kids in soccer this year, and they make you go through the rigmarole of all these training to go to coach. And they were so kid gloves with the kids. They were like, if you're talking to the child, make sure you stay 4 feet away and you go to one knee and you give them some space because they're, you're an adult. And I go, dude, how is this kid ever going to fit into the world if we keep just wrapping them in cushions and bubble wrap? How are they we give them a trophy for finishing 13th and then they go take some job when they're 30 years old and they're like, where's my trophy? And you're like, dude, that's not how the world works. The world's a vicious place and you've got to kind of fight your way through it. So that's what I really loved about your approach. I'm creating warriors. I have 2 little girls and I think the same way of like trying to make them, indestructible in a way.
Because Yeah, the best way to be indestructible is let them get out there and fail. And that's really difficult as a parent.
Yeah.
But, Micah Fink posted something on it, and he does the Heroes for Horses deal out there where he helps guys with PTSD. But he wrote a really simple thing. It was fail, learn, grow, repeat. And it was and it may have gotten out. No, it was fail, learn, grow, repeat. And that's basically just stay in that loop. And it's okay for us to fail. And, for us, our end state for raising kids in simple, clear, concise terms is we want to raise kind, confident, competent adults. And
I add empathy to that. I go, if I raise empathetic kids who can think about others and be kind in that way, then yeah, that's the best I could do, I guess.
I agree with you. And I mean, I guess we could have a discussion that empathy is an aspect of kindness.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But,
I totally agree.
Absolutely.
The trick of it is when they learn to be kind to other people, then that internal dialogue, they'll actually be kind to themselves.
We have long conversations because we're in LA and we see we've stepped over some dudes by the grocery store who are not doing well, drug addicts and stuff, and I'm always like, yes, this is horrible, but try to imagine yourself in other people's shoes, I guess is the best way to, but it's hard sometimes. Yeah.
I agree. And I talk to people who get upset about homeless people and they're like, yeah, they're just getting everything for free and they want to live that way. I'm like, I don't think that they've got a good thing going on. It's not the deal. And it's not a big pirate party every day to live their life.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the right answer is, but
I don't either.
Whatever we're doing right now isn't working because there's a lot more homeless people now than I remember when I was younger.
Me too. And it's
one of the things there is an article that came out about this recently, which is that this is going down, I guess, a deep dive, but part of why we're seeing a real increase in homeless people and also a certain demographic of increase is because meth has become Breaking Bad basically came true. They basically made this new type of meth. And you can do it just once and be completely addicted. So they're finding all of these young people that don't fit the profile of who you would think would be homeless are now getting addicted to meth on just one hit. And that's something that scares, I think, us as parents is like between the fentanyl crisis, between this meth crisis, it's, when we were growing up, I don't know, like you could try stuff and probably not die or get addicted to it, but it's a different world now. And I think that's one part of parenting.
When we were growing up, my parents really, their number one concern was if I was going to get kidnapped. I think they were like any van that came down the street. They're like, "Whoa, what's happening here? There's a van."
They're like,
do you think so though, Jason? Don't you think it's a tricky time to raise kids? I think social media and the internet are.
Obviously, the data is because that, especially for young girls, the suicide rates are up, and there is a way that they interact with each other on social media and a type of bullying that really crushes them. I met a guy at a barbecue here recently who had to cut his daughter out of the closet after she hung herself. And, and it was a situation where she had a cell phone and she was up all night texting. And getting bullied and back and forth, but just the lack of sleep is a huge contributing factor to most suicides. Just lack of sleep and alcohol, those two things. And
what's the torture? That's sleep deprivation.
Yeah,
torture.
So
it's crazy. Yeah.
What's the right answer? Well, luckily we live in such a rural area that a lot of the other kids at my daughter's school don't have phones. And so it's not the struggle that a lot of other parents go through where they're if they're going to just not give their kid a phone, then you're ostracizing your child because they're the only ones without it.
That's me. My kids' friends have phones and I won't give her one.
You can find, and we found a watch phone that they can only call a couple numbers on, and they can text on, and they can't access the internet on. And so right now that's, our training wheels to get started with it. One of my friends at Echelon Front, Dave Burke, they got a great strategy where their daughter just leaves the phone downstairs at night. And they actually have a phone too as well, where access is limited. They can contact their friends, but hey, the parents are going to read all the text messages that you get, and they can see all that. There's no expectation of privacy.
Wow.
And they really shouldn't be for kids.
No.
Kids don't.
No, I take my kids' iPads.
Privacy.
They're all on my account, and I take the iPads at night. I take them upstairs with me. Yeah, it's just tricky. It's so sad sometimes. But I do know your daughter. I don't know if she has a working phone, but she has an axe. We all saw the video, and she has a throwing axe. So I think she's gonna do just fine. You got to get her a little holster, like a pocket holster for the axe.
Yeah, and a knife. My daughter is one of those people that sees what needs to be done, and for the most time will just lean in and start doing it. So when I have her helping me with a project, she'll just see what needs to be done and start doing it, and she handles tools really well. My son has to be motivated about the project. So if I just tell him, hey, get over here, we're doing something, he's going to wander off and stare at birds or do something else. But if I invest a little time up front, and I'm like, hey, here's what we're doing, and here's why we're doing it, and then willing to let him run some of the tools instead of just stand there, then he's into it.
Yeah.
But I have to make that effort up front. And then I also have to realize that the job's going to take me longer to get done doing it this way. But it's like teaching them to tie their shoes, right? I'll lose the time now, but later on I'm going to gain the time because I'll have a competent helper in both cases.
Right.
But it took a lot of days to get that kid to tie her shoes, man. It took a while.
Oof, really?
Yeah. Hannah she didn't want to. She was like, nah, I'm good. I'll just go with Velcro. That's the problem. There's Velcro. And she's like, my daughter, she should be called Lightning because she always takes the path of least resistance. And so I tried to teach her to tie the thing. She's like, nah, I'm good. I won't worry about it. Hey, Jason, have you ever seen the show Alone?
Yes.
I love that show. And
are you about to tell him what I think you're about to tell him? Because that's what I'm thinking too. On the count of three, say it. You should go on Alone.
Not Jason, maybe not me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right, I'll go.
They were asking me, and because I people were like, "Hey, what would happen if you weren't alone?" And I always joke, I go, if they dropped me off with one of the 10 alone, and then the helicopter went to take off, the pilot would look over his shoulder and go, "Jamie, how'd you get back in the helicopter?" I go, "Dude, where's the find a Four Seasons?" Because I like high count sheets. That's really Daddy likes high count sheets, which is so funny because you are the opposite. Do you watch that show and go, "I could do 100 days"?
No, I you never. It's a real gamble where those people wind up, and going somewhere and essentially starving for 100 days. No thanks.
But here's the thing: I don't feel like you would starve.
I'm always fascinated by the different strategies that people are using. Whether would I bring the bow or is the gill net a better call, or the saw or all that? And it seems like really, ideally, you're somewhere where you're catching fish because it's the perfect deal. It's a high fat count. Like people get the rabbits and the squirrels, and they're not getting enough fat, and they're still kind of starving to death.
The one guy killed a moose, and he by the end he goes, "The meat's so lean, I couldn't put any weight on. Like, it didn't matter how much moose I ate; there was no fat on it whatsoever."
Wow.
That's always been my problem with moose.
Well, and the Wolverines always go and take everybody's food except for who's the one guy that he made it.
Kills the Wolverine in the middle of the night with an axe, that guy.
Well, and he made this log vault that the Wolverine couldn't get into. That's the same. What's the name of the guy that killed the yak with a knife?
I didn't see that one.
He was awesome.
I just saw the guy who killed a beaver the other day.
I feel
and
like
the
they
one
all
dude's
have
killing a
very
bear.
similar names too.
Killing a
They're all
bar.
like Damon, Morgan.
But I do think that show should be called "Who Can Starve to Death the Slowest," And it's funny because
Yeah.
they'll carb up and they'll like put as much weight on as they can before they go, and then just slowly starve to death. Oh
I
my
That
God.
genuinely think because of the body percentage like weight loss thing, I feel like there's not, and don't ruin any spoilers, I haven't seen the latest season, but I think it's going to be impossible for women to ever win that, only because I think they lose too high a percentage of their body.
I thought they had a good shot though, because they held on to more body fat.
I think
But
in
this
the
is a
real
Jason
world
question.
they do, but I don't know. I feel like in the real
I don't
world,
either. I've seen some women that I thought should have won.
100%. They always end up getting taken out.
They get
on
taken
events.
out because
Yeah.
they go, it's not healthy.
I
Or
think the
they
game is
get like
rigged.
frostbite or something.
Yeah. Yes, that one woman that, oh my God. the
I
front
love
line.
She
that
had the best
show.
attitude ever. And I think
Ever.
80% of it is your attitude. And she, you know,
100%.
she hasn't eaten in 2 weeks and she gets up. She's like, what a beautiful day it is. And and she's being genuine.
Narcolepsy, one of our biggest fans here, says the mistakes get me, like the woman that axed her foot and had to leave. One dude broke his ankle like day 3. Yeah,
Oh,
The guy that
Yeah.
set his house on fire.
that was crazy. The dude set his house,
Oh.
his fireplace. But here's what I love about the show, and I think Jason really nailed it, is that what I leave that show with, like even when they kill an animal, they're so grateful and so thankful and so part of. There's no animosity towards anything, and they're just thankful for every day that they're given. And I think it's such a great way to approach everyday life that when I watch that show, it motivates me and it makes me feel happy.
yeah, I'm with you. I think, you know, when we bust out kindness, empathy, gratitude is another one that's huge. And a sense of gratitude will pretty much fix that's what people start to lack when they get stuck in a depression cycle.
Well, and we've talked about this before. The problem with social media to me is that negativity is rewarded more. A negative comment will actually gain way more likes and follows and or controversy and more comments than like, hey, have a great day. So it's such a tricky medium. We're almost training this next generation coming up to be negative because they're being rewarded with more followers. Do you see that cycle at all, or am I just misreading that?
I try to, if I see someone that's negative, then I just don't follow them because I don't want it in my life.
Right.
And so, you know, there's that saying, what you focus on, you'll become. And so if you're sitting around and you're just wigging out, watching the news all day and looking at every bad thing that's happened, your life's going to be miserable. Of course, there's a balance, right? Because there can't be any light without darkness. And so I find that every once in a while, I've got to read a book or take something in that's to make sure that I understand how good I've got it. Like Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, or Jocko podcast. About every 9th podcast he covers something that's really dark. And initially, when he did, there were some podcasts like he covered the Rwandan genocide, and I had to stop listening to it. I couldn't listen to it straight through. I had to stop. And he covered the My Lai massacre, and I had to pull over, and I was crying during that podcast because I was so upset. But then when you listen to that, you're like, hey, all the little gripes and complaints that I have, they don't matter. And so while you don't want to do that stuff all the time, in order to have the right perspective, every once in a while, you have to delve into the darkness, I think. You just have to maintain how you're going to do that.
We go dark. Yeah. And I have a very gallows sense of humor as a comic, especially because I feel I totally agree with you in that way of these, God, I was watching some movie about some war film, and the one guy's the newbie there, and the other guy goes, you're going to be shocked with man's inhumanity towards man. How one man can actually behave to another man is frightening at times. And so when you see those, but we're the same, where we get you go, oh my gosh, I lost somebody passed away. I'm going to be thankful for everyday life. And then we get into a traffic jam and we're like, get the Blake out of the way, honking our horn. And, we compartmentalize everything, and it's hard to have that daily cycle. So when you read that book about meditation with your kids, like, I'm a huge believer in meditation and centering your mind in some way on a daily basis and trying to pull it back. But I still, I struggle with it constantly.
Well, I mean, we're all gonna, and that, practicing mindfulness where you're just paying attention to what your emotions are doing. And then you can just not let them drag you all over the place and beat you up, because that's what they'll do. Chris Voss, when he was on Jocko podcast, was talking about a study they did where they had people in a functional MRI and they were looking at their brains, and then they would show them some like pictures that would make people sad. And so the people would see the pictures and they get sad, and they could see their different parts of their brains lighting up. And when they said to the people, hey, name the emotion that you're feeling right now. And when they named it, the reaction stopped by like 80%, and they worked through it like in a third of the time that everybody else did.
Wow.
So then the indicator of that is like, hey, emotional intelligence is hugely important. And Jocko had a couple of psychologists on his podcast, and they were talking about resiliency and how to make your children resilient. And they saw that children that came from families where the families were open and honest and talked about their emotions and talked about what they're feeling. And one of you was just saying that, but they were always able to process any trauma a lot faster and just move on from it. Whereas people that could not name their emotions that they had, it really brought them down, and Kate, we were talking about this earlier, where, this is a flaw in raising boys a lot of times, because they're like, hey, don't deal with your emotions or just hide them or knock it off. And there are times when they're crying and you're like, hey, let it go, and maybe the right answer is like, tell me what emotion you're feeling right now.
Yeah.
Tell me,
That's
what
kind of how we
emotion-
address especially with our oldest.
I think that's a great idea.
We try that with him. And we've actually had other parents tell us and teachers that he's very good at articulating his emotions above what they're used to seeing at his level. So I've always felt really good about that.
All the research is indicating that you're setting them up for success doing that. Brene Brown wrote a book called Atlas of the Heart, and she's really famous for her talking about sympathy versus empathy, which is that YouTube video is fantastic. But Atlas of the Heart, she breaks out like 37 different emotions just to try and help people understand them. And then the more nuanced you get, the better you're at it. But, Jamie, to your point about meditating and then practicing mindfulness, because you kind of see where you're at, and then you just then you can actually detach from it so much easier.
One of our narcolepsy says mindfulness is like toning a mental muscle, and it's true. It's so funny when you take one step back and look at yourself and go like, ugh, which I've done. I mean, during the pandemic, I was homeschooling 2 kids, and there were days I was like, I'm not gonna make it, man. Like throwing a lamp against a wall, and then I'd have to just sit quietly at the end of the night, and my wife's like, "Are you okay?" And I go, "No, I am far from okay." Mulligan was the same. Jason was the same. We'd have long conversations about like, dude, I don't know if I'm getting through this thing, because they were young at the time and we were hanging on by a thread. And as you grow into it, you start to go, and it almost me trying to see my own mindfulness then helped me talk to my daughter, like when she would have meltdowns and be like, look, you can wreck the rest of the day, or you can take a step back. You can always, and I'll tell this all the time. So you can change where you are anytime you want. Whatever you're feeling, just think about it and say, I don't want to feel this way anymore, and try to take steps in a different, because, she'll have a meltdown and she'll be stubborn and we'll go like, go to your room or whatever. And then instead of like turning it around and, being sweet and trying to write an apology or something and come out, she'll like, One time we punished her. We said, get in the corner. And then 20 minutes later, we were like, come out of the corner. She's like, no. And she stayed in the corner for like an extra hour.
Yeah, she's a badass.
And I had a conversation of like, that's just a gift for me. That's not hurting me whatsoever. So I'm not sure who you're hurting in this department except for yourself. So it's just like all of a sudden, like becoming a parent is like becoming a psychologist, where you're having to have these crazy conversations that you never thought you'd have.
Well, it's interesting. I feel like my husband and I, something, I think the truth about parenting is we all are making mistakes. We just don't know what they are until the kids are older, right? And then the kids will tell us what the mistakes were. And what I do know is that the mistakes that I grew up with, I'm trying not to replicate those. So in my house, my husband and I both see a therapist. We tell our boys, we have feelings doctors. We have doctors that help us think about our feelings, go through our feelings. We're not keeping any of that a secret. I've said sorry to my kids when I've yelled at them and realized, you know what?
Me too.
That was, you got me on a bad, that was mama's fault. That wasn't your fault. Doing that sort of stuff, because I think, okay, that was what would have been important to me growing up, because I grew up in a very yelling family. There was no accountability whatsoever. And I'm just like, look, I'm going to try this tactic. Now, what else am I messing up? I don't know. I'm not going to know for a while, but I think that's the one nice thing about parenting is like, we can fix the problem that we had, and we'll just have to hope for the best on the rest of the time.
And hope for the best. Jason, what was your childhood like? What were your parents like?
My dad was a Marine, but he wasn't your stereotypical Marine. He was a pretty mellow guy, but he had a threshold, and then if he lost his temper, look out. And my mom was raised by German immigrant farmers, and so she was pretty strict, and she was really involved. And so we had like all this stuff that we were doing. So it was like, we had swim practice. She decided we were going to swim. So that's what we did. We swam. And the only break I got from swimming is when I played water polo. But swim practice is like two practice, morning practice, afternoon practice, and then swim meets on the weekend. And it just becomes your life. And it's a horribly boring sport.
So my 10-year-old swimming, and I was shocked because I played soccer through college, and she was like, "No, I like swimming." I go, "Really? That's your sport?" And she wants to do water polo. That's so funny that you say that, dude.
Water polo is a lot of fun. But I had a great childhood. I can't complain at all.
I mean, my father, he was a screamer to a degree, but only when I made him. And so I felt the same way. I had a great childhood. I didn't know that we were like lower middle class, I guess, but we did. I never wanted for anything. I had a great childhood. I guess it was fun.
I had a nephew that said something so great. He's 17 now, but his mother, who's my sister-in-law, my husband's sister, she got a divorce from her husband. And he said, I didn't realize that they had a divorce. I just thought we were super rich and had 2 houses. And it just shows you that must mean that they did a nice job of keeping things somewhat normal in a really tumultuous, hard time. That his takeaway was, all right, 2 houses. What's up?
Well, Jason, your oldest son went through a divorce, right? Was he, at what age was he when you guys broke up?
5.
Oof.
4 or 5.
Yeah.
Which I think, that's an easier time for them to assimilate through it than
that was what my nephew was.
Than like 12. 12. I think so too. Hard though.
And it would have been just all the drama and crap that would go along with it, where they're just in a blender because,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
not a big deal. But at the end of the day, when my kids aren't doing something that I'm like, what are they doing? Why are they doing it? Then the first place I need to look, this isn't the first place I always look, but the first place I need to look is in the mirror, because I just how I'm behaving for any given situation to just do a better job.
I love the self-reflection. I really do. I mean, I honestly, it's kind of inspiring in a way to go like, oh man, I wish I was. We do these podcasts and we have such wonderful guests who come in, and I've learned so many lessons about don't you think so, Mulligan? Like all the people we've had on, I'm like, I wish I was more like that.
I know.
Happens almost every time. I always take away something from everybody where I'm like, Oh yeah, that would have been really handy to understand before today.
It is funny to, you sit there and even my wife sometimes, like we both are like, oh my, the daughter needs help. And sometimes you're like, actually, I might need some help. It might be a lot of this might be me.
I've got a great feelings doctor for you.
Well, I used to do so much stand-up, and I'd always say stand-up was my therapy because I would get up and tell jokes about and it was all autobiographical. And so after I would kind of make ridiculous jokes about how my own behavior, and it was somewhat self-reflective in that way of going,
well, you're not getting up once a week, so that's
I know.
not therapy anymore.
Telling like idiotic drunken stories of the day or the stuff. Like I tell a lot of stories about the kids. And then at the end, you kind of do look back, Jason, and you go like, how can I do this better? What can I do instead of like, and I think that's not just with kids. I think that's probably one of the greatest skills in life is to, instead of making everyone else adapt around you to mold to you, to be like, how can I, in the SEALs, that was probably a big part of the team membership is to go like, you got to find your way and fit in with everybody. Really. I mean, it's every job, but some people are so steadfast in their own mindset of like, it's my father used to say that, it's my way or the highway. And you'd be like, you go like, I'll take the highway, I guess. I don't know what to tell you.
Jamie, you have a comment from Freddie. My therapist asked why I started therapy, and I said there's a better version of myself in my mind, and that's the version me and my family deserve.
That's a T-shirt, Freddie. We gotta put
beautiful, Freddie.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Freddie.
Yeah, that's really great, Freddie. That's so cool.
And that I mean, that's the key of humility, right? That's such a humble thing to say because the second you say, well, you know what, I'm pretty good at this or whatever, then any progression you're on to get better, it stops there.
Yes.
But when you're like, well, you know what, I can always improve. I was having a discussion with one of my friends, and his daughters are a little bit older than mine, and he was talking about how he interacts with his daughters. And one of his daughters at middle school had a crush on a boy, told her friend, and then the friend went over and told the boy right away. It was a miserable day for her. And I'm like, well, how did you react to that? And he just said it. He just asked her, he goes, man, that seems like that was pretty rough. How did that make you feel? Instead of going, who said that? Well, you can't, like giving her advice, which would be my default. My default would be like, okay, hey, you got to cut Kim off. You can't trust her anymore, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not helpful.
But you can't trust Kim. Let's face facts. Kim is
Kate.
Kim is untrustworthy.
Yeah, and that's not really helping. And what he did was perfect because he was there for there. And then she's always going to come to him with her problems. If he's not judging her or giving her strange advice, but just sitting with her and being empathetic is
I've almost gone one step further. I've tried to remember who were the cool kids in school and how they dealt with everything. And in a Holden Caulfield, Catcher in the Rye type of way of, I wish we all, if I could go back in time and be like, in that situation, I'd almost be like, well, you like the kid, right? And she goes, well, I did like him. And I go, then feel comfortable with everyone knowing that you like him. Like in some weird way, I want my kids to own it. I don't know if that's right or not, but to go like, to be comfortable enough to go, let's water off my back. Like I had my daughter, like somebody was saying they were teasing her about something and she lost her mind. I said, the way to deal with people who are teasing you are to either ignore them or yes and it and go along with it. And as soon as you do that, they're going to get bored and they're going to leave you alone. So there's this weird comfortability. And maybe that comes from what you're doing where it's like, how does that make you feel? Well, I feel this way. And go, yeah, you're going to feel that. You're going to survive it. It's not that big of a deal. That's just hormones moving around in your body, making you feel this. But the truth is to own who you are. This is your vessel for the journey. I was telling because my daughter, she needs glasses and she's so upset about it. And I go, listen, this is the journey. You're in this vessel. You got to take care of it and own it. And this is yours. And you're not going to be like someone else. You're a redhead. You're never going to be this other person. You're you. Own who you are.
I mean, the great news is everybody in her generation also needs glasses because of the small
Yes.
screen.
It's a small
So
screen.
she's going to be in
for
great
sure.
company.
They all actually, that's true. They all need glasses.
They all do.
But you
All of
know,
them,
she's the only redhead in her basically school, except for her sister, the bright red hair, and they were teased and stuff. And I said, one day you're going to be so thankful for that. But it's this fine line at that age of like trying to fit in, but also stand out. It's this yin and yang that they have to deal with, and it's really, it weighs on them.
We call it de-weaponizing in my house, which is an insane way
I
to
like
talk.
that.
Well, you
But-
should tell Jason about your
Yeah.
son, Kate, because
my
no
son,
one.
Yeah, I have an 8-year-old son.
Yeah.
I have 2 sons, but I have an 8-year-old son who has alopecia, so he's fully bald, and he's got patches that grow in, and it looks strange, but we basically, starting from a young age, did I do it right? I don't know, because I think the way he feels about it changes with the age that he is, but we try to just sort of be like, yeah, well, this is just who you are. Like, we're not going to get you a medication for it. There's people are like, well, there's, you could, there's this new trial, and the trial says you can get leukemia. He's fine.
Yeah.
Like,
It's okay without hair.
let's just adjust to the thing. So we were so lucky. He was young enough, and we supported it, and it's just what he's always known, and now it's sort of a source of pride for him. But he has withered a bit as he gets older, and so every once in a while, I'm like, listen, if somebody calls you Caillou at school, ask them if they want an autograph. Lean into it. Say like, yes, I am Caillou. Yeah. Would you like an autograph? Like, because as soon as, if they're going to use that as a weapon against you, as soon as you don't react to it, you've de-weaponized them. There's not, and he was so upset one day because somebody was making fun of him because he wanted to play kickball with them, and he was chewing on a sweater. And they said, you're a little second grader chewing on your sweater. And I was like, Neil, that kid missed the big thing he could make fun of you for, which is that you're bald. I said, he must know you're not going to react to that.
I would have gone, oh, my sweater's delicious. It's so good. Do you want, I always told you, I come from the school of improv, so you yes and. As soon as you yes and something, you take all the power away from what they just said.
100%.
Yeah.
And I feel like and it's hard to teach that or instill
So
it because
hard.
it's something that's still
it's so hard.
As adults, are we even really doing it? But I don't know. I just feel like that's a
Have you gone through that at all, Jason, with your kids being bullied or anything like that?
Of course. And so what I told them was, I said, hey, do you guys know what a staring contest is, right? And they're like, yeah, the first person who blinks loses. And so it's just like a staring contest. When somebody makes fun of you, you just say to yourself in your head, oh, okay, I'm in a contest right now. And then you just don't give them a response is a win. There's that. That's a basic win. And then the advanced win is where you whatever they did, you yes and it, like you were saying, Jamie, or you're just like, yeah, I like my hair. You know what? Now I don't have to waste money on shampoo or whatever. You say something like that, and then that completely takes it away from them. I'm trying to get across to them that someone that says something nasty to you is broken inside, and it's an indicator that they have got a really bad internal dialogue, and their life is kind of like just all, it's a living hell if they're the kind of person that would say to another person something nasty.
Yes.
And but they're not there yet. And I'm not sure, I'm not always there yet. If I get sniped with a negative comment, my first intent is to come back and not usually transcend it, but that's the right way to handle it. And so that's how I explain it to them, and I'm working through it in that manner. Like, hey, especially my daughter's really competitive, so if I frame it in a competitive thing, then it's like, oh, then she's going to want to win. But when we would clean weapons, that's when everybody would start teasing each other, and you could not give a reaction or show any weakness, because if you showed you had a soft spot, it would get verbally beaten out of you.
That's it. Yeah.
So you would just learn that pretty quickly, and like you said, in a world where there's not a lot of teasing going on, there are people that just can't handle it, and they haven't thickened their skin up yet. But
I'm also from Boston, so we have I've been known to throw a few shots over the bow myself. But with our friends, that's half the crack is, you take the piss out of each other. And it was almost like you had to learn to hang, because if you couldn't hang, you weren't going to hang, and you're in serious trouble.
Well, there's and I feel like there should have been subtitles, because it's a nuanced. You haven't seen your buddy in a while, and when he sees you, he's like, "Hey, dummy, what have you been doing?" And just rolls out a bunch of expletives and tells you what kind of breath you have and everything else. And the subtitles are like, "Hey, bro, I miss you, and I haven't seen you in a while," is what he's actually saying. I remember
Jamie must really miss me then.
There was one of the senior SEALs when I was a brand new SEAL at SEAL Team 5, and he was this great big guy, and he was just essentially like a yoked Archie Bunker. and because he was just bombastic and always yelling at everybody. And I remember one time he said to me, he says, he said, "Hey, that when I'm harassing you like that you, because if I don't like you, I won't say nothing to you."
That's it.
And
we only pick on the ones we like. That's true.
I figured, like, I get along with old codgers really well, because I can understand the nuance that when they're calling you, "Hey, bleep breath," or whatever, that's because they actually like you, not because they don't like you. Because if they don't like you, they won't say anything to you.
That was a military thing. I mean, the military had the brotherhood and the fraternity of it all. And there was definitely, people had some verbal banter going on that was super fun. But I wanted to have one comment by Narcolepsy here, because I love his stuff. He goes, "As a kid, I was bullied mercilessly. I wish my parents had given me any insider advice, but they didn't know, because I never told them it was happening. Communication is everything." And to your credit to your friend who had his daughter who took her own life, a lot of times you see the news and the parents like, I had no idea what was happening. And so I kind of am a snoop with my kids and their phones and stuff. I'm kind of trying, I don't know, I kind of keep an eye on it, and I try to always have a dialogue and go, "How are you? What's happening with this friend? What's going on?" Because I do think some parents, the Columbine shooters, parents had no idea. Those kids were in the basement, like writing journals, wearing trench coats, getting an armory. Parents, no idea whatsoever. I was always like, how do you not know what your kids are into? But I think it's pretty common these days.
Yeah. And, the other thing is, and so, like, here's what I think that was great when my friend found out and was talking to his daughter about, the incident at school. He didn't give her advice. He didn't judge her. He just made space for her and allowed her to feel comfortable. Obviously, you got to give your kids advice at some point. But I think the problem with it is, if every time you're talking, you're giving them advice, eventually they're just going to turn you off. Because it's a bank account. And so you're going to make deposits into that bank account by offering them space and just letting them be who they are and being empathetic. And you're going to have to meter the advice in between times that you're doing that. Otherwise, they're just like, "Oh, geez, here we go again," and that's really, really hard to do. And I guess that's the gold standard, but it's something to consider.
It's hard to do, man. Honestly, and we're reaching the end of the show. We got to wrap this. We've already gone over, but just so much helpful advice, man. And it's so funny because Kate and Jason and I we talk about this all the time about, like, Mulligan is like, are we doing this right? I don't know. Yeah. You never know till it's over. Yeah. I guess we'll see. I don't know how the whole story pans out, but some of your stuff though, Jason, I wrote down, got to let them fall. I love that. You have to.
You wrote fail, but you're rereading it as fall now.
Fail. I meant fail. I actually read it as fail, but I meant you got to let them fail, which I think we're not doing enough. I think we're trying to get every obstacle out of their way, and we're not preparing them for life to let them fail. Yeah. What you focus on, you become. So true, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Loss of autonomy. It's funny because as a unit, as a family unit, you're like, yeah, we are all autonomous in some way. And I think that's amazing. And emotional intelligence, I loved. Any last words of wisdom before we let you go tonight, dude? And let's tell people where they can come find you, because your Instagram is so motivational, and it's just heartwarming. I love, and honestly, we talked about how negative so much stuff is, and that's why you're not. And you're doing great. You're actually kind of setting a new bar for social media, I think, because you're such positive outlook on life, and people are starting to gravitate more towards that. And I think they're starting to go, I don't need this negativity in my life.
It's a nice.
I mean, for social media, I'm the most active on Instagram. I think it's it just is, for whatever reason, the way it's designed, people are in a better humor on Instagram than some of the other socials. So that's where I'm at jason.n.gardner. And I'm just posting whatever project me and the kids are doing, whether we're building birdhouses or just really whatever I want to talk about and put out there.
Throwing axes, a lot of throwing axes going on.
Yeah.
Jason,
And
sorry.
No, go ahead, Kate.
No, I was gonna say, I just wanted to compliment you. I want to say that I feel like, again, as a layman, as somebody who doesn't really know very much about it, but I do feel like being on any SEAL team is seen sort of as the pinnacle of manliness. It's sort of seen as the pinnacle of strength. So I think it's so impressive that what you're giving the public is actually, yes, and what manliness does look like, being able to do those push-ups, but it's also taking care of emotions. It is also taking care of your children. It is, I mean, I just feel like you're such a beautiful example for everybody to, I think you provide sort of like, you show that, but it doesn't have to be toxic, right? Yeah. It doesn't have to be, you can be a person who is inclusive and who cares and has empathy and gratitude. And that, I feel like, is such an important thing, because I think people have this idea that SEALs are one way, and I think you show us like a totally different side of that. So thank you so much for being out there.
Yes, thank you so much. Couldn't agree more. But also, if you are getting into a fight in the Trader Joe's parking lot, I think you want, Jason on your side, right? You want to go, hey, Jason, this dude stole my cart.
I'll tell you why. Because Jason would say, you know what is it about him that is bothering you so much? You need to look in the mirror. And then I'd be like, okay, fine.
Okay. Let me go get some banana muffins in the back of Trader Joe's. I'm okay. Any parting words you'd like to share with everybody, Jason? This has been such an educational moment. I love it.
It takes the greatest strength to be kind. It's easy to be mean. It's easy to be fearful. It's easy to be angry. Kindness, it takes strength. And when you start being kind to other people, the next thing that's going to happen is you'll start being kind with yourself. And all of us have that brutal internal dialogue where we're beating ourselves up about what we did last year, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And you just got to let that go and be kind to yourself and be kind to other people, and your life will be better.
Dude,
there it is.
That's it. Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Gardner joining us today. Thank you so much. If you know another parent who needs to hear this, please share it with them. Please follow, like, subscribe to our podcast. Jason Gardner, can't thank you enough. For Jason, Kate Mulligan, myself, Jamie Kaler, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you next time here in the Parents Lounge.
We will be here also live Thursday night. Jamie, you want to tell us what?
That's right. We have Reed Scott. He was on a little show called My Boys, and another big show called Veep, and the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. He has a couple kids, and he's really funny and a super, super great dad. So we're excited to have him this coming Thursday. So check us out. Come check our Instagram and Facebook and elsewhere here on the Parents Lounge. See you guys next week. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
JG.